"Take it off, please," she begged. The rancher froze, and then he had a bright Wild West story. Dust swirled in the dry wind as Clara rode her tired horse along the narrow, winding trail leading to the remote ranch. Her clothes were worn, her boots dusty and cracked from long travel, and her eyes, though tired, held a spark of determination. She had been traveling for days, leaving behind a town where life had grown too harsh, where every day felt like a fight she could no longer win. The ranch had been mentioned by a passing traveler, a place far from the chaos of the town, where honest work could earn her food, shelter, and maybe even a fresh start. The ranch came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by wide, open fields. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney of a modest cabin at the center, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance mixed with the occasional bark of a dog. Clara slowed her horse, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. She knew that stepping into this new place meant putting her trust in strangers, and that had always been hard for her. But she also knew she had little choice. She had nowhere else to go. As she approached the main cabin, a tall man emerged from the doorway. He was broad-shouldered, with a rugged face tanned by the sun, and eyes that seemed to measure every detail before making a decision. His name was James, the rancher who owned this land. He was known in the nearby towns as a man of few words, someone who ran his ranch with quiet authority. His eyes fixed on Clara, taking in her worn clothes and tired expression. There was curiosity in his gaze, but also caution. "Evening," Clara said softly, her voice slightly trembling but polite. I was hoping you might have some work for me. I can cook, clean, or help with the animals, anything." She kept her gaze steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. James did not respond immediately. He studied her for a long moment, noticing the determination in her eyes, the way she held herself despite obvious exhaustion. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Work ain't easy here. Days are long and the work is hard, but you can start tomorrow. Sleep in the barn tonight if you need, but don't wander off." Clara felt a small wave of relief. "Thank you," she said, trying to hide the gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her. She led her horse toward the barn, her mind racing with a mix of anxiety and hope. She had heard stories of women who had tried to work on ranches like this and failed, but she told herself she would not be one of them. The barn smelled of hay, leather, and horses. She found a quiet corner and settled her horse before laying down a small blanket she had carried with her. As she watched the sun finally disappear behind the hills, she allowed herself a rare moment of rest. Tomorrow would be her first day, and she would need all her strength. The next morning, the ranch awakened with the usual sounds of work. James was already up before sunrise, tending to the cattle with careful precision. Clara stepped out of the barn, brushing the dust from her clothes, and made her way toward him. The early morning air was crisp and smelled of grass and earth. James nodded as she approached. "You'll start with the animals," he said, handing her a brush and a bucket. "Cows, horses, and the chickens. Keep up and don't be afraid to ask questions." Clara nodded, feeling a surge of nervous excitement. She approached the first horse, a large chestnut mare, and began brushing its coat. The animal's warmth and gentle nicker eased some of her tension. She had grown up around animals in her childhood, and though she had been away from them for years, the familiarity brought comfort. Throughout the day, Clara worked hard, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She carried water, fed the animals, and cleaned stables. James watched her from time to time, his expression unreadable, but Clara felt as though he was assessing her every move. She could feel the weight of his gaze, but rather than making her nervous, it pushed her to do her best. As the sun climbed higher, the work became more exhausting, and Clara felt the heat pressing down on her. Sweat soaked her clothes, and her arms ached from lifting hay bales and buckets of water. But she pushed on, determined to prove herself. James moved around the ranch with effortless skill, showing her how to handle the animals and explaining the routines. Despite his quiet nature, he had a way of making instructions clear without unnecessary words. By late afternoon, Clara had begun to feel a sense of belonging she had not known for a long time. The ranch, with all its hard work and simplicity, felt like a place where she could start over. She even began to notice the small details, the way the wind moved through the fields, the calls of the cattle, and the sound of James' voice giving instructions to the workers. There was a rhythm here, a sense of life continuing no matter the troubles of the past. After the day's work, James handed her a bucket of water and some bread he had saved from lunch. "You did good today," he said simply. Clara accepted the food with a grateful smile, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with hunger. It was the first time in weeks that she felt appreciated for her efforts. That evening, Clara sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sky turn shades of deep purple. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, she felt as though she might belong somewhere, even if only temporarily. James came out to check on the cattle one last time before nightfall. He glanced at her, and though he said nothing, there was a small nod of approval in his eyes. As night fell over the ranch, Clara lay down in the barn, listening to the quiet sounds of the animals and the distant rustle of the wind through the fields. Her thoughts wandered to her past, the hardships she had endured, the people she had left behind, and the fear that had followed her for so long. But here, on this isolated ranch, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was where she could finally find some peace, some sense of safety and purpose. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Clara woke before dawn, helped with the morning chores, and gradually earned James' trust. She began to notice his quiet acts of care, making sure she had enough to eat, giving her advice on handling the animals, and occasionally sharing small stories from his own past. There was a distance in him, a kind of guardedness, but there were glimpses of warmth and humor that made her smile. Despite the hard work, Clara felt a growing sense of pride. She had survived hardships before, but this was different. Here, she was building something with her own hands, contributing to the life of the ranch. And though she had only just arrived, she began to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, she was no longer alone. As the sun set on her first week at the ranch, Clara walked to the edge of the fields, looking out over the vast expanse of land. The sky was painted with brilliant colors, and the wind carried a sense of freedom she had almost forgotten. She took a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion in her body but also a quiet satisfaction in her heart. She had made it through the first week, and she had a feeling that life on this ranch, with its challenges and its quiet beauty, was just beginning to open new doors for her. Little did Clara know that the coming days would bring moments of trust, vulnerability, and unexpected connection. James, the stoic rancher, had noticed something in her, a resilience, a strength, and a courage that he rarely saw in anyone. And though neither of them would say it out loud, there was a sense that their lives, both marked by past struggles, were about to intertwine in ways neither could have imagined. As night embraced the ranch and the stars began to twinkle above, Clara felt a quiet hope. This place, with its open fields, hardworking animals, and the mysterious rancher who seemed to carry his own burdens, might just be where she could start anew. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that the future, though uncertain, might hold something beautiful for her at last. The next morning on the ranch began with the soft glow of sunlight spilling across the fields. Clara was already awake before the rooster crowed, her mind still full of thoughts from the previous week. Life on the ranch was beginning to feel natural, the rhythm of chores, and the quiet moments between them giving her a sense of stability she hadn't known in years. She moved with purpose, brushing the horses, feeding the chickens, and checking the fences along the property. Each task, though tiring, gave her a sense of accomplishment, a reminder that she could still shape her own life. James moved around the ranch with his usual calm authority. His hands, rough from years of hard labor, worked efficiently as he inspected the cattle and repaired worn equipment. Though he said little, Clara noticed the way he watched her work, sometimes offering a small nod of approval or a brief tip on handling an animal. There was an unspoken understanding forming between them, a quiet trust that grew with each passing day. That afternoon, after the sun had climbed high and the work had begun to slow, Clara approached James while he was fixing a gate near the barn. She hesitated for a moment, her heart beating faster than usual. She had something on her mind, something she had been holding back since arriving at the ranch. She needed to share it, but she feared how he might react. "James," she said softly, catching his attention. His eyes met hers, steady and curious. I need to ask you something." It might sound strange. James paused, resting on his hands against the gate, and studied her carefully. "Strange or not, go ahead," he said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle weight that made Clara feel both nervous and safe. Clara took a deep breath. There's something I've been wearing since before I came here. It's not easy to explain, but I need to take it off. I can't do it myself. Will you help me?" Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the small item hidden beneath her blouse. James froze. The words hung in the air, unexpected and unclear. He blinked, unsure how to respond. For a moment, the ranch, the animals, and the wind all seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet tension between them. His mind raced as he tried to understand what she meant. "What is it?" he asked finally, his voice steady but cautious. Clara hesitated. "It's a necklace," she said softly. "A gift from someone I lost. It reminds me of things I don't want to carry anymore. I need to take it off, but I can't do it alone." James studied her face, noticing the vulnerability in her eyes, the courage it took for her to ask. He realized that this wasn't just about a necklace. It was about trust, about letting someone see the parts of herself she usually kept hidden. And though he was a man used to solitude, he felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, the unspoken responsibility of helping her in such a personal way. Clara extended her hand slightly, offering the necklace to him without saying another word. James hesitated for a moment, then carefully reached out, taking the small chain from her fingers. The metal was cold against his rough palms, and he felt the fragility of the object, the fragility of the trust she was placing in him. Slowly, he unclasped the necklace, his movements deliberate and careful. Clara closed her eyes as the chain slipped from around her neck. A sense of relief washed over her, a burden lifted that she had carried for years. The simple act, though small in appearance, was monumental in meaning. It marked a turning point in her life, a step toward freedom from the past that had haunted her for so long. When the necklace was finally removed, Clara opened her eyes and met James' gaze. There was a silent acknowledgement between them, a shared understanding of the trust that had been given and accepted. She felt lighter, freer, as though a weight she hadn't fully recognized had been lifted. And in that moment, James felt something shift within himself as well, a recognition of her strength, her courage, and the depth of her character. For the next few days, the ranch seemed to hum with a new energy. Clara moved through her work with a quiet confidence, and James watched her with a subtle admiration. There was a change in the way they interacted. Conversations became slightly longer, with shared stories of past hardships and small laughs over minor mistakes. The air between them, once filled with cautious distance, was now more open, more familiar. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence at the edge of the property, Clara paused to wipe the sweat from her brow. She looked out over the rolling fields, feeling a sense of peace she had never known in the town she had left behind. James approached, carrying a hammer and nails, and nodded toward her. "You're getting stronger every day," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You've got the hands of someone who knows what hard work is." Clara smiled faintly. "I've had to learn," she admitted. "Life hasn't made it easy for me, but I think I'm starting to understand that hard work can mean something." That it can build a life instead of just surviving. James nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You've got grit, he said simply. That's not something you see every day. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's presence began to change the rhythm of the ranch. She was no longer just a worker. She became part of the life there, her laughter and determination weaving into the fabric of daily chores and quiet evenings. She learned the names of the cattle, the habits of the horses, and the subtle signs of weather that James had observed for years. And James, in turn, began to share more of himself, stories from his childhood, memories of his family, and the lessons he had learned from a life spent taming the land. Despite the growing trust, there was still an undercurrent of tension, a quiet awareness of the vulnerability they had both shown. Clara had revealed a part of herself she rarely shared, and James had accepted it with care. Both knew that trust was fragile and that the past had left its marks on each of them. Yet, the experience had forged a bond, a silent understanding that they were no longer entirely alone. One evening, after the work was done and the animals had settled, Clara found herself sitting on a small bench outside the cabin. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and the air carried the scent of hay and fresh earth. She thought about the necklace she had removed, about the relief it had brought and the courage it had taken to ask for help. She realized that the act had not only freed her from the past, but had also opened the door to something new: trust, connection, and perhaps even the possibility of love. James joined her, leaning against the railing with his arms crossed. He looked out over the field silently for a moment, then spoke. "You've changed things here," he said quietly. "Not just the work, but the way it feels. There's a lightness now. I think it's because of you." Clara turned to him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "I didn't mean to change anything," she said softly. "I just wanted to survive. I never imagined I could belong somewhere like this." "You do belong," James said firmly, his gaze meeting hers. "And not just because you work hard or because you've earned it. You belong because you're real. You've been through things and you've come out stronger. That matters." For the first time, Clara felt truly seen. The years of struggle, the fear, and the loneliness seemed to fall away, replaced by a sense of being understood and valued. She realized that the ranch, the work, and the quiet man who had helped her remove the necklace had given her more than just a job. They had given her a chance at a new life. As night fell over the ranch, Clara and James sat in companionable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear, dark sky. The wind rustled gently through the fields, carrying the promise of tomorrow. And though neither of them spoke of what the future might hold, there was an unspoken understanding that something important had begun. A bond built on trust, courage, and the quiet bravery of two people who had found each other in the midst of hardship. Little did they know that this bond, forged through a simple act of vulnerability, would only grow stronger in the days to come. Challenges would arrive, tests of character and heart, but the foundation they had built during those first days of trust and understanding would guide them through whatever lay ahead. And for Clara, the removal of the necklace was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was the first step toward a life filled with hope, connection, and the possibility of love in a place where she had once felt she could never belong. The mornings at the ranch had begun to feel like a rhythm, a natural pulse that Clara had grown accustomed to. She woke before the sun, hearing the soft lowing of the cattle and the occasional clatter of hooves on dirt. Each day brought new tasks: feeding the animals, repairing fences, hauling water, and tending to the fields. But Clara approached them with a quiet determination. There was something satisfying in hard work, in knowing that her hands were shaping the life around her. She no longer felt like a wandering shadow, but part of the ranch, part of a world that had once seemed so distant and unreachable. James, the stoic rancher, observed her from time to time. His eyes followed her movements as she worked, noting the care she gave to each task. He had seen many people come and go over the years, but there was something different about Clara. She worked with a seriousness that spoke of experience and resilience, yet there was also a gentleness in her touch, especially with the animals. Horses that had been skittish under previous workers now allowed her to approach closely, nuzzling her hand as if recognizing her sincerity. The bond between them grew quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. They shared small conversations during work, James teaching her how to mend a broken fence, how to identify sickness in the cattle, and how to read the signs of the weather. Clara, in return, shared stories from her past, tales of hardship in the town she had left behind, and the dreams she still carried, even if they seemed fragile. There was laughter at times, small moments of levity that punctuated the long, hard days. James found himself smiling more often, appreciating Clara's humor, her honesty, and the courage it took for her to keep moving forward despite her past. One afternoon, as the sun reached its peak, James asked Clara to help move a group of cattle from one field to another. The task required careful coordination, and Clara proved herself capable. She directed some of the younger animals with a steady voice, gently guiding the older ones with soft nudges and a calm presence. James worked alongside her, his hands rough and strong but careful in every movement. Watching her, he realized how much trust she had earned, not just from him but from the ranch itself. During a break, they sat under the shade of a large oak tree, drinking from water bottles and wiping the sweat from their brows. Clara watched the wind ripple through the grass and felt a deep sense of connection to the land. "I never knew a place could feel so alive," she said quietly. "Back in town, everything felt crowded and harsh. Here, even the hard work feels honest. It feels like it matters." James nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "This land, it doesn't forgive laziness, and it doesn't pretend to be something it's not. But if you put in the work, it gives back. You've learned that quickly." Their conversations became a daily ritual, small windows into each other's lives. Clara learned that James had grown up on this ranch, inheriting it from his father, and that he had spent years building it into a thriving homestead. She discovered the losses he had endured, the loneliness that came with running a remote ranch, and the quiet pride he felt in every small accomplishment. And James, in turn, began to see Clara not as a visitor or a worker, but as someone whose presence brought life and warmth to the ranch. One evening, as the sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, a minor crisis arose. A group of calves had wandered too close to the riverbank, and the rising water from a recent rainstorm made the ground slippery and dangerous. Clara and James rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding as they carefully guided the calves back to safer ground. Clara's calmness under pressure impressed James. She moved quickly, thinking ahead, using her instincts to protect both the animals and herself. Once the calves were safe, they paused to catch their breath. Clara's cheeks were flushed from the exertion, and her hands were streaked with mud. James looked at her with a mixture of respect and admiration. "You handled that well," he said simply. "You didn't panic. Most people would have frozen." Clara smiled, though it was tired and faint. "I had to," she said softly. "These animals, they depend on us, and I want to do right by this place." The moment of shared relief drew them closer in an unspoken way. They had faced a challenge together, and the trust between them deepened. Clara began to realize that James wasn't just a distant, quiet man. He was someone she could rely on, someone who respected her strength and her intelligence. And James, in turn, felt a growing admiration for Clara, recognizing the courage and determination that had brought her to his ranch and kept her there through long, exhausting days. As the week went on, their bond strengthened through small acts of cooperation and understanding. Clara learned how to ride the horses with greater skill, how to manage the cows during long drives, and even how to anticipate the unpredictable behavior of animals. James, who had always valued self-reliance, began to rely on her in ways he hadn't expected. He sought her opinion on minor decisions, trusted her judgment, and found himself seeking her company during quiet moments on the porch after long days. One rainy afternoon, they worked together repairing a leaky roof on one of the outbuildings. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking their clothes and making the wooden beams slippery. Clara's hands were raw from gripping the tools, but she didn't complain. James offered instructions and steady support, his calm voice a constant guide. When a plank shifted unexpectedly, Clara caught it just in time, preventing a dangerous fall. James looked at her, a mixture of relief and pride in his expression. "You've got nerves of steel," he said, once they had secured the roof. Clara laughed softly, shaking the rain from her hair. "I've had to be careful all my life," she replied. "I guess it finally pays off somewhere." Evenings became their quiet refuge. They would sit together, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes sharing stories and thoughts about the future. Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. The ranch, with its hard work and constant challenges, had become a place where she could be herself, a place where her past didn't define her entirely. And James, who had long carried the weight of solitude, began to appreciate the presence of someone who truly understood the land and the life it demanded. Despite the growing closeness, there was still tension between them, a recognition of boundaries and the need for patience. Clara valued her independence, and James valued his quiet life, yet both were discovering that their bond was becoming stronger, almost like a quiet promise. They were learning to trust not just each other, but also the possibility of companionship and shared life. One afternoon, while working in the fields, Clara noticed James watching her with a thoughtful expression. She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "What is it?" she asked, curious. James hesitated for a moment. "You've changed this place," he said finally. "Not just the work, but the way it feels. There's a lightness here now, a rhythm I didn't notice before. You've brought it." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. I didn't know I could," she admitted softly. "I didn't think I could make a difference anywhere." "You did," James said firmly, "and more than you realize. You've shown me that it's not just the land or the work that matters, it's the people who care for it. And I care that you're here." The words, though simple, carried weight. Clara felt a mixture of surprise and comfort. She had come to the ranch seeking work, seeking a safe place to start over, but she had found something more: acceptance, respect, and perhaps the beginnings of something deeper. James' acknowledgement was more than just appreciation for her labor. It was recognition of her strength, her courage, and the person she was becoming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the fields in gold and red, Clara and James returned to the cabin. The evening air was cool, carrying the scents of hay, earth, and distant pine. They shared a quiet meal, speaking little but feeling the connection in the comfortable silence between them. The bond that had begun with trust and vulnerability was now strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that they were no longer entirely alone. That night Clara lay in the barn, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She thought about the days she had spent here, the hard work, the small victories, the moments of fear and courage, and the growing closeness with James. She realized that her life had changed in ways she had never expected. The ranch had become more than a refuge. It had become a place where she could belong, where she could grow, and where she could trust someone with her heart. James, meanwhile, sat on the porch, looking out over the fields under a sky full of stars. He thought about Clara, the way she had faced every challenge with courage, the way she had trusted him with something so personal, and the quiet strength she carried within her. He knew that life on the ranch would never be the same, not because of the work or the land, but because of her presence. And though he didn't yet fully understand what the future held, he felt a quiet certainty that this bond, forged through trust, courage, and shared life, was just the beginning of something meaningful. As the night deepened and the ranch fell silent, both Clara and James slept with a sense of hope and anticipation. They were no longer just two individuals navigating life separately. They were two people connected by trust, shared challenges, and the subtle, unspoken promise of companionship. And in the quiet of the Wild West night, that promise shone brighter than the stars above, guiding them toward a future neither had dared to imagine before. It's safe, emotional, and dramatic. The sun rose slowly over the wide fields of the ranch, casting long shadows across the land. Clara had been awake for hours, tending to the animals and preparing the barn for the morning chores. The work had become routine, yet each day brought its own challenges. Today, however, there was a sense of unease in the air, a subtle tension that neither she nor James could ignore. The wind had shifted, carrying the scent of distant smoke, and the cattle were restless, their lowing sharper than usual. James had noticed it first. He stood at the edge of the property, scanning the horizon with a careful eye. Years of experience had taught him to read these signs. Something was coming, and it wouldn't wait for them to be ready. Clara approached him, holding a bucket of water, and noticed the furrow in his brow. "James?" she asked softly, sensing his concern. He turned to her, his expression serious. "There's trouble," he said quietly. "I'm not sure what yet, but we need to be ready. Stay close today and follow my lead. Things could get dangerous." Clara felt a thrill of fear mixed with determination. She had come to trust James, and she knew that if he said danger was near, it was real. But she also felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever came, she would face it with him. As the day went on, the signs became clearer. A band of strangers appeared on the horizon, moving toward the ranch. Their approach was slow but deliberate, and James recognized the potential threat immediately. He gathered Clara and the ranch hands, giving quick instructions to secure the animals and protect the property. Clara's heart raced, but she focused on the tasks at hand. She helped corral the cattle into a smaller, safer enclosure and ensured the horses were tied securely. Each movement was careful, precise, and deliberate. The strangers drew closer, and it became evident that they were not travelers but troublemakers seeking to cause harm or take advantage of the isolated ranch. James and Clara moved together, side by side, a silent team formed through days of shared work and growing trust. Their previous conversations, shared meals, and quiet moments had built a connection strong enough to face this challenge together. As the group approached, James stepped forward to confront them, his voice steady but firm. Clara followed closely, her heart pounding. She had never faced a threat like this before, but she trusted James' judgment and knew her role was to stay calm and help wherever she could. The tension in the air was thick, the sun casting harsh shadows on the dusty ground. The strangers demanded supplies and threatened the ranch hands. James stood his ground, speaking with authority and confidence. Clara watched, her breath held, as he negotiated with calm determination. When one of the troublemakers attempted to rush toward the cattle, Clara reacted instinctively, positioning herself to guide the animals safely away. Her movements were quick and decisive, surprising even herself. The confrontation escalated, but the bond between Clara and James proved stronger than the threat before them. James, careful planning and Clara's quick thinking ensured that no animals were lost and that the strangers could not gain control of the ranch. Eventually, the troublemakers, frustrated and unable to succeed, withdrew, leaving the ranch and its inhabitants unharmed. After the tension passed, Clara and James stood together, catching their breath and surveying the property. The cattle were safe, the horses calm, and the barn intact. Clara felt a rush of relief and pride. She had faced danger and survived, and she had done so alongside James, the man who had become her partner in work, trust, and life. James looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and something deeper. "You were amazing today," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you," Clara smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and pride in her expression. "I just did what had to be done," she said softly. "We did it together." The evening brought a calm that felt almost unreal after the day's chaos. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the fields. Clara and James worked together to repair any minor damage caused during the confrontation. Their movements were synchronized, a silent understanding guiding their actions. Each small repair, each careful gesture, reinforced the trust and connection between them. After the work was complete, they sat together on the porch of the cabin, the night air cool and calm. The stars began to twinkle above, and the ranch, which had faced danger that day, seemed peaceful once more. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for this life, for the land, and for the man who had become her partner in facing it all. "James," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, I never thought I could feel this safe anywhere, but here with you I feel like I can handle anything." James looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "You've always been strong," he said. "I just helped you see it, and today you proved it to yourself and everyone here." The bond that had been forming quietly over weeks of work and shared experiences now solidified in the heat of danger. Clara realized that trust was more than just words or small gestures. It was tested in moments like these, when fear and courage collided. And James realized that having someone to rely on, someone who matched his strength and determination, made the ranch and his life richer than he had imagined. As the night deepened, they spoke of lighter things, the animals, the land, and even dreams for the future. There was laughter now, genuine and easy, mingling with the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Clara felt a warmth in her heart she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she felt truly seen, respected, and safe. Days turned into weeks after the incident, and the memory of danger lingered as a reminder of their strength together. Life on the ranch continued with its usual rhythm, but Clara and James carried with them a deeper understanding of each other. Every glance, every word, and every action now held more meaning. The experience had brought them closer, weaving their lives together in ways that neither could have predicted. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the fields, Clara looked at James with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "I never imagined that I could find a place where I belonged," she said, "or someone I could trust so completely." James paused, his hand resting on a fence post as he studied her. "You've earned your place here," he said, "and as for trust, well, today proved that it can grow stronger when tested. You've shown me that, and I've shown you too." The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the wind carried a sense of peace across the ranch. Clara and James continued their work, side by side, knowing that the challenges they had faced had only made their bond stronger. They were no longer just two people living on the same land. They were partners, relying on each other's strength, courage, and loyalty. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a weary traveler seeking shelter and work, she had become an integral part of the ranch, facing challenges, learning and growing every day. And James, who had spent years in quiet solitude, had found in her a companion, a partner, and perhaps even a love that he had not dared to imagine before. The events of the day had tested them in ways words could not capture. Yet through fear, quick thinking, and mutual support, they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more certain of their place in each other's lives. The ranch, once simply a place of work and survival, had become a home filled with trust, respect, and the quiet promise of companionship. That night, as the ranch settled into silence, Clara and James looked out over the fields, the moon casting a gentle glow on the land. They both understood, without saying it aloud, that life on the ranch was more than just chores and animals. It was a shared journey, a partnership built through trust, courage, and quiet resilience. And as they finally turned in for the night, a sense of hope and anticipation filled the air, hinting at a future where challenges would be met together, and where the bond they had forged through hardship and understanding would continue to grow stronger every day. The morning, after the storm of the previous week, dawned clear and bright, with sunlight spilling over the rolling fields of the ranch. Clara rose early, as was her habit, and stepped outside into the crisp air. The land looked peaceful now, almost untouched by the tension and fear that had gripped it just days before. Birds sang in the trees, and the distant lowing of cattle sounded like music after the chaos. She took a deep breath, feeling the calm settle over her. This ranch had become more than a place of work. It had become home. James emerged from the cabin shortly after, carrying a coffee pot and 2 tin mugs. He moved with his usual quiet authority, but there was a lightness in his step, a small smile playing on his lips as he handed a mug to Clara. "Morning," he said simply, his voice carrying warmth she had learned to recognize and trust. "Morning," Clara replied, accepting the mug with both hands. The warmth of the coffee seeped into her fingers and gave her a small sense of comfort, a simple pleasure she had almost forgotten. She glanced around the fields, taking in the sight of the animals grazing peacefully. It was hard to believe that just a few days ago, the ranch had been under threat. They stood together in silence for a few moments, enjoying the calm and the quiet companionship that had grown between them over the weeks. The shared experiences of hard work, danger, and trust had bound them together in ways neither had expected. Clara thought about how far she had come, from a weary traveler seeking refuge to someone who had proven her courage and earned a place in this rugged world. James broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "Clara, I need to tell you something." He paused, searching her face for a reaction. She looked at him, curiosity and anticipation in her eyes. "I've spent a long time alone on this ranch," he began. "I've worked hard, kept to myself, and I didn't think I needed anyone. But these past weeks I've realized something. Life is better when shared. I've realized that I care about you more than I expected." Clara felt her heart beat faster. She had hoped, perhaps secretly, that he felt the same way she did, but hearing the words aloud made it real. She had grown to care deeply for James, not just for his strength and skill, but for the quiet kindness and integrity he showed every day. I care about you too, James," she said softly. "More than I thought I could care for anyone. You've made me feel safe, respected, and valued. I never imagined I could find someone like you." A small smile appeared on James' face, and for the first time he seemed truly relaxed. "Then I suppose we understand each other," he said, his voice carrying both relief and sincerity. "And I want us to build a life together. Not just as partners on the ranch, but as partners in everything. If you'll have me, I want you to be my wife." Clara's eyes widened slightly, tears welling up at the thought that the man she had grown to trust and admire was asking to share his life with her. She felt a rush of joy and gratitude, knowing that this proposal wasn't born out of necessity or convenience, but out of genuine affection and respect. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I will." The moment felt timeless. The wind carried the scents of the fields and animals, and the sun shone warmly down upon them. Clara and James embraced, a bond forged through hardship, trust, and mutual respect now solidified in love. For the first time, both felt that they had found a place where they truly belonged, not just on the ranch, but in each other's lives. The days that followed were filled with preparation and quiet excitement. Clara and James worked together, not just maintaining the ranch, but preparing their home for a new chapter. There was laughter in the cabin as they cleaned, organized, and planned the small celebration of their union. The ranch hands and neighbors, who had watched the pair grow close over the weeks, offered congratulations and support, further strengthening the sense of community and belonging that now surrounded them. Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she moved through the tasks. She had come to the ranch seeking work and refuge, but she had found so much more: love, respect, and the knowledge that she could face life's challenges with courage and strength. And James, once a solitary figure, found joy in sharing his life and his home with someone who understood him so completely. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the fields with shades of gold and red, Clara and James walked together through the pastures. The air was cool, carrying the scent of grass and earth. They moved slowly, savoring the moment, speaking little, yet feeling completely connected. Each glance, each gentle touch, was a reminder of the bond they had formed, a bond tested by challenges and strengthened through shared experiences. "I can't believe how much has changed," Clara said quietly, breaking the silence. "A few weeks ago I was just looking for a place to stay. Now I have a home, a future, and someone who truly cares about me." James nodded, his expression tender. "And I have someone who has taught me more about courage, strength, and kindness than I ever knew. You've changed this ranch and my life, Clara. I can't imagine it without you." As night fell, the stars began to twinkle in the clear sky, their light reflected in Clara's eyes. They sat together on the porch, the quiet sounds of the ranch around them, feeling the deep peace that comes from knowing they had found a place and a person to call home. The bond between them, forged through trust, shared work, and moments of danger, was now stronger than ever. Over the following weeks, Clara and James began to settle into their new life together. They faced daily challenges: weather, the demands of the ranch, and the ever-present need to maintain the land, but they did so as a team. Their connection, once tentative and cautious, had blossomed into a partnership built on respect, understanding, and love. Each day brought new opportunities for laughter, learning, and growth. Clara continued to gain confidence in her abilities, whether it was handling the animals, repairing fences, or organizing the barn. James, in turn, grew more open and expressive, sharing stories and thoughts he had never voiced before. Together, they built not just a life on the ranch, but a life filled with companionship, trust, and shared dreams. One morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the fields, Clara stood by the riverbank, watching the reflection of the sun in the water. James approached quietly, taking her hand in his. "Clara," he said softly, "I know life isn't always easy. We'll face challenges, storms, and unexpected trials, but I promise whatever comes, we'll face it together. You've made me stronger, braver, and happier than I ever thought possible. I want to spend the rest of my life with you by my side." Clara smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "And I promise the same," she said. "I never thought I could find a place like this or someone like you. But now I know that with trust, courage, and care, we can face anything together." They embraced, the world around them fading into the background. For Clara and James, the ranch was no longer just a place of work or survival. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and love. The animals, the land, and the quiet routines of daily life were now intertwined with the joys of companionship and partnership. The ranch, once a quiet, solitary place, now thrived with the presence of two people who had found strength in each other. Their story, marked by hardship, courage, and vulnerability, had reached a new chapter, one filled with love, trust, and the promise of a shared future. Clara and James had discovered that true partnership was more than just living side by side. It was facing life's challenges together, celebrating its victories, and supporting each other through trials, no matter how difficult. As the sun set one final time in this chapter of their lives, casting golden light across the fields, Clara and James stood hand in hand, looking out over the ranch they had both fought to protect and nurture. The animals grazed peacefully, the wind whispered through the trees, and the stars began to appear, twinkling above like tiny promises. They knew that life would not always be easy, but together they could face whatever came. In that quiet, perfect moment, Clara realized she had found not only a home but a true partner in life. And James, who had once walked the land in solitude, understood that he had found someone who could share not only the work and hardships of the ranch, but also the joys, dreams, and love that made life worth living. With the ranch as their witness, and the promise of many days and nights ahead, they embraced their new life together. A life of partnership, of respect, of courage, and above all, of love. A love that had been built through trials, strengthened by trust, and sealed by a shared future under the endless sky of the Wild West.